on this computer. Hi, my name is Renee Hobbs, and welcome to EDC 534, Digital Authorship. Today's date is March 21st. I see here on the call Denise, Meg, Matthew, Barbara, Angie, Pat, and Sherry. We know you're there, right? So happy spring break. Let's just check on the snow issues. I want you to put 5 fingers up if it had a big snow today, and 1 finger up or 0 fingers up if you had no snow today. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0. Let's see where we're going. We got a bunch of 1s and a 3. Okay, so Pat, you are the winner. You had real snow. There you go.
Nice. Real snow for Virginia is probably not real snow for you all. And my road is wet, but we're still canceled tomorrow already. Oh but they didn't clear the sidewalks. The schools weren't open. Nobody had to go to work. And I bet parts of my county maybe had 6 inches, which I know is nothing for y'all, but
it's real snow. 6
yeah,
inches.
still for Virginia, it's a lot.
That's right. And they don't have snow trucks the way we do up here. So
no.
It's a big deal. And you get 2 days off. Is that right?
Yeah.
All right. But you just go later in June like we were.
No, we're done by the end of May, but we start in August. We start August like 10th or something.
Got it. Well, that's better than being in a hot classroom in late June. So
yeah, true.
Okay with that. That's good. Okay, so lots of things going on today, and I just want to do a little storytelling in the what's been going on since I haven't seen you guys since forever, right? So I'm just going to do a little storytelling because in some ways my adventures in Austin, Texas, and in Brazil kind of do relate to our topic for tonight, representation. The most dramatic thing, of course, was there I was at South by Southwest, meeting with the education entrepreneurs and the ed tech people, and I realized that I just left at home my media literacy remote control cards that I had made in Portuguese for my visit to Brazil, because I just knew that they would go gaga to get a remote control card in Portuguese, but I didn't pack them. I left them at the house. So what do you think I did? I called my husband and I said, hey, listen, can you go into my car and get the remote control cards in Portuguese and FedEx them to me in my Airbnb? And he said, sure. And so the next day, I turned on the TV, as I was getting to go to the conference, and I saw there was a explosion of a package in Austin, Texas, right? And actually, by that day, there were 2 of them already. And so I go to the conference, I get home from the conference, and there in my Airbnb is a package. Now I completely forgot that I asked my husband to send me the package. So as I creep up to the Airbnb and there's this Federal Express package, I'm like, holy shit, it's gonna explode. What do I do? So I looked at it for 15 minutes and then I went, oh yeah, oh duh, yeah, right, yeah, my husband sent it to me. Crazy. So just showing you media influence and representing the meaning of small things that was shaped in a very powerful way by that media coverage. Seeing that package meant something differently in the light of that drama. And other little news from South by Southwest, if you are following me on Twitter, you probably saw I did kick up a little bit of dust after Dana Boyd got up and gave a keynote address at that conference. And I think Dana is awesome. I worship her, respect her a lot as a researcher and a scholar and a leader, but in front of 1,500 people, at 1,500 teachers at South by Southwest, she said, media literacy is not happening in the United States. And, it's a bankrupt concept, and it doesn't work. Nobody's doing it, and it doesn't work. So I got kind of angry. So I had to kind of respond to some of her critique. Some of her critique was epistemological, and that is a relevant topic to what we're talking about tonight. She essentially claimed that, if we're living in a society where there's so much information, the information doesn't actually mean anything anymore because there's so much of it. We have a surfeit of information. She says what people are doing to make judgments about things is they're trusting their experience and their emotion. And she said, so basically media literacy can't work because it's about information. And of course, that's not true. Media literacy wants to look at our emotional responses. It wants to look at our experience. It wants to look at our entertainment media culture that we're surrounded in and think about literacy practices in and out of school. But I can be sensitive to, everyone's expecting media literacy is going to solve the crisis of fake news. And we're not going to be able to deliver on that promise, I don't think. So it was a fascinating conference, a great experience. I feel, very, very lucky. After South by Southwest, I got a great experience to go to Brazil, thanks to the U.S. State Department, our tax dollars at work, and go to two big cities in Brazil, Sao Paulo and Brasilia. One of the best media literacy projects I saw in Sao Paulo, I have to tell you about because you're going to love this project. So just to clarify, there's 200 million people in Brazil. It's a big, big country. It's just as diverse and as complex in its diversity as the United States, with immigrants from all over the world, and a great gap. It's certainly even wider than the gap in our country between the wealthy and the poor, right? In the city of Sao Paulo, they've instituted a media literacy project that's really a youth radio project, because many of the poor schools don't have access to the internet. Internet is not in most Brazilian public schools. Data projectors, nope, sorry. But every kid has a cell phone. And of course, with a cell phone, you have the capacity to record audio or video. And so 47,000 children in Sao Paulo public schools participate in a youth radio project where kids from ages 9 to 15 get experience learning how to be radio journalists. They practice by interviewing people in their school. Then when they get good, they interview people in their community. And it's deeply connecting the learning Portuguese and Portuguese language with social studies and civics, right? It's like it's tying those two subject areas together. Program's been around for about 20 years, very, very successful, but they started a new initiative, which I was just thrilled to be able to see happening in action. They created a partnership between a poor middle school and a private middle school. Right? The kids at the private school all come from the wealthiest Brazilian families. They all live in Sao Paulo. They have everything you might imagine that we have, and then more. Like, it's like the Wheeler School or Moses Brown, right? It's a really nice private school. Well, for 4 months, for the last 2 years, for 4 months, every 2 weeks, a bus takes the kid from the Colégio Dante Alighieri school and buses them to the poor Casablanca school. And then they meet. And then 2 weeks later, the bus comes and takes the Casablanca kids to the Dante Alighieri school. So every 2 weeks, they had an experience where they spent about 2.5 hours with the kids from the other school. At the first meeting, the teachers said, look, we think you kids can make a social media campaign. And we want you to learn together how to make a social media campaign. the kids turned to them and said, well, first of all, what's a social media campaign, right? And secondly, what should it be about? And the teachers took a very hands-off approach and said, you guys will figure out what the topic should be. And they did some instruction on what's a social media campaign, but then it was time for the kids to create, they had to create their own topic. They had to decide what they wanted to address, and they did a whole bunch of media production activities to address the theme of, basically their theme was respect everyone. And what was really powerful about getting to meet the children and to see how they analyzed and what they created was that these kids talked a lot about the stereotypes they brought about each other. Like each of the kids had stereotypes about the other group, and that the process of working collaboratively was just a very powerful experience in disrupting stereotypes. So I started thinking about here in Rhode Island about what 2 schools might I get to partner up to try that project, right? And could it be done without a bus? Could it be done, using digital media? Anyway, so if you have any thoughts about that, I'd love to hear about it, because I like that idea of bridging the social class gap with the power of public communication and advocacy. So anyway, all right, enough about me. I have been learning a lot, but so have you, I see. And so let's take a look at a little bit about what we're going to try to tackle tonight. You can see that the first thing that I want to explore with you is the beautiful infographics that you created as part of your reflections on the reading. And I just want to talk through some of these ideas a little bit and just really celebrate some of the great work that you did. I made some screenshots of some of the work that you did that I was most impressed with. So I think, Meg, this one starts off with you on the Parker essay. Parker is one of the scholars who talks about how trust and reciprocity are part of the complex relationship between the subject of the interview and the filmmaker, essentially, or the digital author. But I really liked how your infographic emphasized this idea that this is a power relationship, and that's really the focus of our exploration this week, as thinking about ideologies of representation as dimensions of power. And so I loved this wonderfully practical framing of what to be thinking about when you are representing people, ideas, and events. I thought that was fantastic. Barbara, I just thought the metaphor of the journey and the car and the driving and the questions, and then the 4 different stances, color themed and everything. That was just a strong, strong way to get at some of the ideas of representation that are embedded in the digital storyship thing. Pat Johnson, is this yours? I'm not sure if this is Sherry's or Pat's, but I thought this was really interesting, basically translating the ideas of representation down to middle school a student, I think, as you described it. But when I saw this, it raised a little red flag for me. In one of the essays, I think it's in Jean Burgess, she says something like, we aren't always going to agree about how representation should work, and we have to avoid the risk that we take an approach that's the lowest common denominator approach, which is we don't create anything unless everybody's okay with it and likes it. Right? And there's a risk in creating an ethical set of norms that is constrictive on creativity, And I think that's partly why I appreciated the nuances here. Matt and who did this one? That one, Matt, Adam, and somebody else I can't recall here, sort of framed it a little bit more broadly, right, in relation to a set of choices that have consequences, right? And so I think in some ways, learning to be a public communicator provides challenges that we maybe conflicts are not always going to get resolved. Conflicts about meaning and interpretation that are not always going to get involved, right? So I was really pleased to see some of the great creative work on that. And to that end, I thought it would be good to hear from you in responding to this question, because creating infographics as a way to synthesize, like that's not something you do every day. When I tried to do it, I came up with this chart, right? As I see it, the 3 readings, which are really interesting and problematic, all get around this complicated ethical triangle between the subject, the author, and the audience, and raise issues about consent, free will, intentionality, consequences, social good, and spectatorship. So I thought those 6 ideas seem to be really important, and I love the idea of Jay Ruby's ethical triangle. So I see how valuable thinking through that set of complicated social norms and relationships can be. But my questions to you is this. As you saw making an infographic, what was your love-hate relationship with the form? What did you like about the form of the infographic, and what did you dislike? So what were the challenges of making an infographic? What did you notice about its affordances and its limitations? That's our discussion question right now. Adam, you're first.
Something I checked out some of the sites on your book website, and I signed up on one of them, the third one, because I liked the templates they had, and they had a lot of different ones, and I liked that the templates, taking the template approach, so seeing what was already there, had my mind working in different ways to show the information based on what was available. So I could have, my first idea was to go into Google Drawings, just have some shapes with some kind of flow of ideas. But I liked that seeing what else was created gave some different ideas of how to present the information. So whether some people used a tree or the records to kind of think of information in that way. Do you want to show step to step? In that way, I chose the one with the person, and I wanted to kind of relate the information to different parts of where it connects to maybe emotionally, because I just liked the way of trying to show thinking of the information in different ways, but based on almost like a menu of pre-thought of ways to do it. I thought it was kind of neat.
Absolutely fascinating, and thank you for sharing this idea about the scaffolding that the templates provide. Other perspectives on what did you notice about this process, Barbara?
Well, am I on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah. When I looked at the sample infographics, they were too busy for me, and they reminded me of the eyewitness books. They reminded me of Sesame Street. And I grew up with Captain Kangaroo, okay, which is kind of like a Mr. Rogers speed. So maybe it's just me, but sometimes just the use of color and multiple little images and arrows, I find it confusing. Mm-hmm. That's why I went with something that was simpler, that might be a little more approachable for some people. Kids probably are more used to the all over stuff, but I like it a little simpler. So
nice.
strategy.
So for you, the scaffolding of the templates was really just a distraction. And once you got to a clean sheet of paper, that's where your creativity could unfold.
Yep.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. Other perceptions on what you notice about making an infographic? What are the affordances and liabilities? Mary.
I really like the opportunity to synthesize text into image.
Why?
I really
Why?
why? Just because it caused a different kind of synthesis. It must be a different use of cognitive processes, I think, to transfer from the written word to a picture and to have to think about what picture will encompass that idea or convey a particular idea. I also started with a template, but I completely undid the template and rebuilt it because I felt like I chose a template that was all about breakfast. And of course, this had nothing to do with breakfast. So I had to completely take it apart and put it back together, which was fun once I got going.
Wow, that is a great story. So many ideas in there. Of course, I feel like there's a lot of research needed on that question that you raised about how synthesizing text into image does something, right? Creates some deepens understanding. Love that idea. And I love the idea that you started with the template, but you deconstructed it. You took it apart as part of the creative process. Love that description. Other perspectives on what you notice about your own experience making it. Angie.
I just wanted to add something to what Mary just said, because I think that translating text into image is something that's even higher order than just synthesis. It's creating. It's like building a metaphor. So I think, yeah, I just wanted to add that little piece. I think that it's actually something higher than it wasn't, for me, it wasn't just note catching. It was like I had to really deeply understand the text to be able to represent it in images.
Great point. So you think the phrase synthesis doesn't capture the level of deep reflection and analysis and insight. Great point. I might agree with you. Other perspectives on this topic. What'd you love and hate about making an infographic? What are its affordances? And then I'd love to hear, there are liabilities to this form too, right? And I bet you ran into some of the liabilities. It's not a perfect form. What did you not like about making an infographic? What was difficult or troubling? Painful? No, you loved it? Meg, you're smiling there, but you're not talking. So tell me about, did you love making an infographic?
I didn't love it. It's not my preferred method for receiving or communicating information. I personally, I've had to create them for other purposes in my job, but what I struggled with the most was finding images that, because my topic was on power, and so trying to find images that represented learners and the content, but without creating situations of power and asymmetries of power in those images, but also still working within like the Creative Commons license. So that was a constraint for me.
Great observation. And I think it's an interesting thing. You were sensitive to the very issues of representation as you were deciding whether or not, or whether or how to use representations. Yeah, cool. I feel like what I've been observing with my undergraduate students is that for some students, the experience of having to represent the message in a visual way seems to keep them closer to the text, or somehow enables them to stay focused on the text. And I am still trying to understand that a little bit myself, because many students really just, when they are writing, they're not really responding to the text. They're like they're doing their own, they're telling their own story, they're writing personally, they know how to do that, right? But they're not so good at textual analysis. But somehow infographics seems to keep them anchored to the text. So I'm really intrigued about that, and I'm still exploring what that actually might look like. I wonder if this experience where you made infographics made you think a little bit about how you might use infographics in the context where you are teaching and learning. So can you imagine a circumstance where you might have students create infographics, or why not?
I have my students use Google Drawings a lot in my class. I'm an ESL classroom in my school, and I have access to Chromebooks. So I like to have my students do activities that not only involve actually doing the work. So if they're in a reading group, they just finished a chapter, I'll usually have them represent information from that chapter in different ways, either like in the form of summarizing or by having them make connections, depending what they're doing. And rather than give them a preloaded handout or one that I created, I usually give them just the blank Google Drawings to create and tell them what I'd like to see. I want to see every bit of information in a different shape. Or sometimes I'll have them do a timeline, and they actually have to make the timeline. So make the line and show, and so that way they have to think about how they want to, not only what they're going to write, but part of the process actually manipulating technology to do what they want, learning how to search Google Images, put them to find images that fit what they're trying to say. Like I had an interesting one I did the other day that I thought came out pretty good, was I had students summarize a chapter that they just read, but only using images. So they had to have 6 main events in the chapter. And I said, I should be able to get the main idea of what happened in the chapter just from images and directing us to the next image.
Mm-hmm.
So
Cool.
it was kind of like just an experiment thing I tried. They liked it, but
Right.
it was just trying different things.
Yeah. I think that kind of experimentation is a really good thing. So one of the reasons why I'm so keen on this topic of ethics of representation is because my experience has been that anytime students are making media, there will be some moment of crisis that involves a representation ethics issue. So I want to tell you about one of my oldest stories. This is from back in the 90s. Some of you weren't even born yet, right? I was working in 7th grade, and we had given the students a project. It was kind of like a project that involved their science teacher and the English teacher collaborating. And the project was to make a short video about a science topic. The topic that one group picked was pollution. And this group of 7th graders decided that they were going to make a video about the creek down by the playground that always has trash in it. And so one day we'd storyboarded, they had scripted, we were ready to go shoot. This was in the 90s, right? And down we all traipse, right, to the creek. And lo and behold, guess what? That day, there was no trash in the creek. Now, every day, these kids would come in the playground and they would see trash in the creek, but the day we came with the camera, there was no trash. And so this one little kid pulled on my sleeve, Miss, can we put some trash in the creek so we can take pictures of it? And I recognized it right away, like light bulb went off, the triangle, right? So basically we had a teachable moment right then and there. Like we stopped And we're like, oh, what do you think? Should we do that? And then let's, should we put trash in the creek to take pictures of it? Why? Why not? And so it ended up being the most amazing, spontaneous 10-minute discussion, standing there with the, 6 kids in the group, and realizing this was the kind of ethical crisis you want every kid to have to wrestle with, right? Which is, what are their responsibilities to the audience, right? To the environment, right? And to their purpose, right? In the end, they decided that they were going to put some trash in the creek, take pictures of it, and then remove it, right? And truthfully, at the time, I remember not being very happy about that. I remember thinking, wow, I really failed. I tried to provoke them into thinking ethically, and in my view, I didn't know that they made the right choice, but they made that choice. And so from my point of view, creating conversational spaces like that for kids to wrestle with those tensions comes up every time kids make media. It's just a matter of, are we alert to it? Do we recognize it as a opportunity to address issues of representational ethics? Okay, so that being said, I wanted to, I didn't know if you guys did this, but when I was rereading the Patricia Lang article, I remember how I felt when I saw the video that she describes in the article. And so I thought it would be useful for us to look at it again. There's a concept in Patricia Lang that I want to make sure that everybody understands, because it's a big idea in media literacy and in digital literacy, and we're still trying to wrap our heads around it. The concept, Patricia Lang calls it, I think remember this, it's an old book right now. It's a couple years old. She calls it context. She calls it context lament. The context lament. You can never fully understand the context. When you're looking at a piece of media work, you have really no other information about the context in which it was created. Today, we call that the context collapse, right? The idea that artifacts float around in the digital space and we all encounter a bit of it. We see it, but we don't have anything around it. And so I thought it would be useful for us to view the because why not video that is featured in the chapter that we read, and talk a little bit about the questions it raises for us about context. Are you guys up for it? Okay, so we're going to watch this video. I'll play it on a large screen for us to all watch, and then we're going to be thinking about, like, what's the context around this? We got a lot of the context around it from Lang, but let's see if we can just review some of that context that normally is missing. So it wasn't hard to find this YouTube video. Let's see if it'll come up for me. Here it is.
Lauren, what's up, baby?
Hold on, I gotta start at the beginning.
Lauren, what's up, baby? Why are you in that outfit?
Because I just came back from dance.
Because you just came back from dance? What were you dancing about?
Nutcracker.
The Nutcracker? How's that going?
Good.
You about ready to, can you do a little of it for me? What?
If you're going to put it on the internet, then no.
Who says I'm going to put it on the internet?
Yes, you are, Daddy.
Why? Why would I put it on the internet?
You should put everything you tape on the internet.
Not everything.
Yes.
No, really, not everything. I leave some stuff off.
Dad, please stop. Dad.
What?
Dad, please stop.
I'm not doing anything, Dylan.
What?
Nothing. Not doing anything.
Being weird and annoying.
No.
Why are you doing that?
Why not, Dylan? Look at me. Blow me a kiss. Love you, Dylan. Love you, Dylan.
Does this have some sort of purpose to it?
No purpose at all.
Why? Why?
Because.
Because why?
Because why not?
Whoa. Okay, so what's missing that can help us understand the context of this particular piece of ordinary voice, this ordinary voice?
The publishing process is missing. In the text, they mentioned that he had a conversation with his daughters before he published. So that context is missing.
Good. What else?
It's hard to tell what kind of relationship he has with his children. I assume these are his children. It doesn't look very good. It could just be a bad day for them. Or maybe he really doesn't have a good relationship with them at all. And you can't really tell necessarily really what that relationship is like. From the surface, I don't like it.
Matt.
So I visualized this reading it, but then seeing the video, I was actually kind of laughing because I saw a great relationship. He's the annoying dad, who's, even when she smiles at him, she's like, stop it. They value the interaction with their dad. Sure, they're annoyed, but again, we don't see that the revision process or the conversation that they're having. But I don't think if I were to be one of the original viewers of that video, I wouldn't have been one of the people calling for the lynch.
Adam.
Along those lines, yeah, I don't necessarily see, I guess my question would be in his purpose. It seems like he's showing like a family photo album publicly. Like in the article, it kind of spoke about how, it's reflecting on a relationship with the dad and his daughter. It's showing kind of like these tender moments and like how they feel about him video blogging this. But my question kind of comes back to, well, why is he putting this in a public sphere if it's not for reaction to it in some way? If he really just wanted to show a tender moment between his family, why not make that video a private video that he shares with family? There must be some kind of ulterior. He's showing this either as a piece of art, a piece of creative, whatever. So he wants something. He wants some kind of feedback from a general public to this video. And I think that the fact that his daughters were protesting to that in the video, even if it was joking and there was an air of like, oh, you're going to put this online again, even if they had those discussions, I think that that's problematic to me.
Thanks for sharing. Other perspectives, Pat?
To me, it's interesting that it's 10, 11 years ago. And now every year I have a conversation with sixth graders and we talk about what pictures of them are out there, right? What videos. And they tell me almost every class, they don't like that their parents put pictures up and their grandparents put pictures up. And there's pictures of my granddaughter who's 2.5 since almost before she was born. And so do these kids have any say in this? Those kids do, I think, because that's what their father does. But every other child in America whose parents are putting them on social media don't really have a say in it along the way. And they can't really take it back. You know, it's out there for 10, 12 years now for some of them. And it's all of it. And I do it too. I put pictures out. I try not to without permission, but I was working on photos for our next LEAP project, and I talked to my friends who their kids are in the pictures, and to make sure it's okay, I include them in a project, because it's kind of a different step than me just putting them on my personal account somewhere.
I really appreciate your observation about the power dynamics at work there, right? And child's ability to consent or not consent. How do we think that through? Thanks for sharing. Other perspectives on how you see this, what's missing? What does it mean to transform everyday experience into shared public culture? Jean Burgess says it's a good thing for culture that families like this guy take ordinary life and turn it into art. He says it's a good thing, but it might be and it might not be. Angie.
There's another voice in the text that I really have been wanting to bring up, which is the feminist criticism of the patriarchal home videos. And I think what's happening here is because I don't understand the author's purpose, he's sort of normalizing this like smile, sweetheart cultural norm that a lot of people are working really hard to dismantle.
Right.
And that there's so many views of this, and that if it's not criticized, then the work that's being done to criticize it is almost undone. Yeah.
Great observation. Certainly the performance, the expectation of performance that's normative, the smile for the camera, that's something Patricia Lang talks really explicitly about as essentially patriarchal. So nice point. So how we translate these ideas about the ethics of representation into our practice are going to vary a lot, right? Whether and how we make sense of these ideas in relation to what we do in the classroom is going to depend. And so it's worth reflecting a little bit on what parts of these concepts can be meaningful to you in your practice. And I think we're really at a very early stage at figuring out how to do that. Part of the reason why I wanted to show you Jessica Parker's project was to see how she found the opportunity to explore issues of representational ethics in the Interview an Immigrant project. So I'm not really sure how to teach about these ideas outside of the teachable moment. And that's what is an interesting challenge, I think, and maybe a place where some innovation could be, maybe simulation. Maybe there might be ways to create circumstances where these issues come up apart from having kids make media, but certainly we're left with an appreciation of the idea that people wrestle with these moral and ethical questions. Often we wrestle with them in ways that tend to favor what our existing impulse is. That's the challenge of ethical reasoning, right? We have a gut feeling about what we think is right, and then we rationalize to come to justify our decisions. But I really do feel that ethical triangle is a really powerful concept that could be introduced to very young children in simple ways, right? So All right, enough said about that. Let me share my screen with you. I want to make sure that you are fully prepared to get into your digital storytelling project. Oh my God. Can you guys believe it? For Leap 3, you're going to be creating a digital story. So let's talk a little bit about digital storytelling Leap 3, and let me see what questions you have about it. It's a quick run between now and April 4th at midnight. But what are you thinking about as you think about what digital story you're going to compose, create, and perform? What challenges will you face in this project, and what will be the delights? Are you comfortable with the concept, or you have questions? Pat?
I started writing and thinking about it because I have spring break next week and will not have good Wi-Fi. So I had trouble like narrowing it down and coming up with a story I could tell in 5 or 6 minutes first. And then, like I said before, finding images. So narrowing it down is the hardest thing for me. I still think I'm going to have to pull it in some more to get it in 5 or so minutes. So that's hard, I think.
I am really glad that you are wrestling with that problem. And today I decided in this class to tell some stories because I wanted to be reflective about how hard it is to tell a short story. It's hard, especially a story that has a point or is insightful or says something about who you are and what you value. I think it's the hardest part of the project. I think for this project, the technology is the least of your challenges, right? And the getting your story to the essence is the big part of the challenge. So I'm glad you're wrestling with that, Pat. Seems like you're on the right track. Other questions, comments, fears, anxieties? You're ready for this, right? So let's just take your temperature. 5 means you're super enthusiastic about doing a digital story, and 1 means you're terrified. What's your temperature? Where are you on this?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
You know, the story I have in mind, I need to take my own pictures. That's okay?
That's awesome.
So I'm going to have a series of pictures and a narration of my story. Okay. All right, then I can do that.
Good.
I like storytelling.
Yes. Yes. I'm glad you do. Other questions that you have? Okay, so let's talk about what I'd like you to do to read for next week. I feel like the second half of the semester, I think all of the readings are awesome. I think all of the readings are awesome for the second half of the semester. And if you liked reading about representational ethics, you are really going to like next week's readings as well. So let me see if I can put those up here for you. So I'll go down to the bottom of the page. I'm really aware of the work that you're going to be doing this week and next week on the storytelling project. So here's what I'd like you to do for next week. Next week's topic is digital storytelling. Our focus question is, what makes digital narratives so powerful and complex as a tool for learning? I want you to read chapters 10, 12, and 13 in the Create to Learn. And then I'd like you to choose one of the following, unless you are a PhD student. Chang Hee, Meg, who else? All right, if you're a PhD student, you have to read everything. You kind of have learned that by now, right? But you can choose StoryCorps at your library. You can choose a situated practice of ethics for participatory visual and digital methods in public health research and practice, a focus on digital storytelling. Who knew that digital storytelling is used in the context of public health and that it raises complicated ethical dimensions? Or Maria Ranieri's research, mobile storytelling and informal education in a suburban area, a qualitative study on the potential of digital narratives for young second generation. I think it might be young second generation immigrants. I'm going to check that title. I think it might be young second generation immigrants. I might have left that off by accident. And that's in Learning, Media, and Technology from a few years ago. So you're going to read Create to Learn, and then you're going to choose one of these 3 pieces. And so the only production activity I'd like you to do, let's all contribute to a Google Doc with some informal written response to the readings. Which of the ideas you encountered in the readings are most relevant to your LEAP 3 project? Which ideas are relevant to your interests and ambitions? What wonderings or questions did you have as you read? That's all. So potentially two readings that should get you ready to think like a storyteller. Okay, so I think one of the things that I'm going to be doing between now and April 11th, as I create my own digital story, is I'm going to get practice using the story structure to tell stories. I've been thinking a lot about how stories have heroes, villains, helpers, and victims. And that one of the most common ways a story arc works is to turn the victim into a hero, right? Or turn the hero into a villain, right? Or have a helper come and rescue the hero, right? And so I've been thinking a lot about the stories that I tell and how they position me as sometimes as a victim. Like tonight, when I told you the story of South by Southwest, I was the victim listening to Dana Boyd misrepresent media literacy. And I had to transform myself from a victim into a hero by telling my own story. So I've been thinking a lot about the stories that we tell and how they're shaped by the archetypes of our culture and by the expectations and social norms of the people in our audience, and how we have responsibilities to make sure the stories are accurate representations of what we purport to represent. And yet we understand that the realm of the imagination shapes all creative work, ultimately. So it's a humbling and noble process that you're about to unspool. So I think you should have as much fun as you can with it, all right? Okay, I'll see you guys next week. Oh, just a note, I have not yet emailed you your LEAP 2, but they're all ready. They're going to go, those will come right out in the next hour after class. So you should be getting my LEAP 2 evaluation feedback. And are there any other issues or open questions that we have? Oh, you have sent me in some emails about your final project. And I'm gradually and slowly responding to those. I sure hope by the end of the week I've responded to all of you. If you don't get an email from me by Friday, just ping me again and it'll come back up to the top of my email box, right? Okay, thanks a lot. All right, see you next week, guys.
Thank you.
Bye now.